big money on your own. And mine is more of like, regardless of how much you have, you can take care of what you do have.
But I think he'd be great for that because he was literally on his sister's couch. He was broke. Like,
yeah.
And like he had to do small things to get.
You're tuning in to the Black Hollywood Live Network, featuring news, interviews, and commentary on all things Black Hollywood. Hollywood redefined. From Los Angeles, California, streaming live thanks to Akamai Technologies. This is Black Hollywood Live. Justice is served. Featuring the week's roundup and commentary on legal news. Black Hollywood Live. Hollywood redefined.
You're listening to Black Hollywood Live.
And now, the host for Black Hollywood Live, Justice is Served.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Justice is Served. It is January 13th, 2016. My name is Chelsea Galicia and I am a workers' compensation attorney. I am joined by one co-host today, Shaka Smith. So today we got like a West Coast and East Coast perspective. I, born and raised here in LA, undergrad at UC Irvine, law school, Southwestern here, downtown LA, so I stuck really close to the coast my whole life. Shaka, on the other hand, born in Miami, undergrad at Princeton, law school in DC. And then moved out here to pursue acting and fitness modeling, but did have experience in public defender's office with natural gas law, healthcare law. Yep. So hopefully we will provide you some really great analysis and perspectives on this week's legal issues in the news. Let's start off with Sandra Bland. This story came out over the summer. She was somebody who was pulled over by a police officer and it was caught on camera. And the officer who pulled her over, Brian Insinia, has just been indicted for a perjury charge. But I think that to get the best understanding of everything that caused this situation, we should look at the video itself. Yeah. It's very clear. You can hear everything, you can see most everything. And so we're going to play a few minutes for you now so you can get a sense of the situation, the context of the story that we're talking about.
Hello, ma'am. With the Texas Highway Patrol, the reason for your stop is you failed to signal your lane change. You got your driver's license insurance with you?
Benign so far. Failure to signal. Legit reason to pull her over.
Seems reasonable.
Okay, ma'am. You okay?
I'm waiting on you. This is your job. I'm waiting on you. What do you want me to
You seem very irritated.
I am. I really am. Because I feel like this cap is what I'm getting a ticket for. I was getting out of your way. You were speeding up, tailing me. So I move over and you stop me. So yeah, I am a little irritated, but that doesn't stop you from giving me a ticket. So let's continue.
Are you done?
You asked me what was wrong and I told you.
Okay.
So now I'm done, yeah.
Okay. You mind putting out your cigarette, please, if you don't mind?
I'm in my car. Why do I have to put out my cigarette?
Well, you can step on out now.
I don't have to step out of my car.
Step out of the car.
See, I don't get that moment right there.
That's where it breaks down for you.
No, you don't have the right.
Step out of the car.
You do not have the right to do that.
I do have the right. Now step out or I will remove you.
I refuse to talk to you.
And it's not clear who's right in that moment about does he have a right to pull her out or not.
Step out.
I mean, in my estimation, I think it's quite clear that he has no right to pull her out of the car.
Get out of the car now, or I'm going to remove you.
And I'm calling my
I'm going to yank you out of here.
Okay, you going to yank me out of my car?
Yeah, none of his actions past writing the ticket,
25.
I believe, are warranted.
You're going to.
Yeah. Don't touch me.
Get out of the car.
Don't touch me. I'm not
Clearly, by now at this point, the situation has deteriorated.
Yeah.
25. 7 County FM 1098.
And
he did call for backup. So
Get out of the
he
car.
did do that right, but perhaps at that point he should have
Get out
just
of the car now.
pulled back and waited for
For
backup
that
to
guy.
come, yeah,
Get out of the
absolutely.
car.
Why am I being apprehended? You
I'm
just
giving
opened
you a
my
lawful
car
order.
door. You just
I'm
opened
gonna
my
drag
car
you
door.
out of here.
So you threatening to drag me out of my own car.
Get out of the car.
And then you
I will
stun
light
me?
you up. Get out.
Wow.
now.
Wow.
And I will
Get
light
out of
you
the
up.
car.
For a
That's
failure
not
to
cool.
signal.
Yeah.
You're doing all of this for a
Get
failure
over
to
there.
Right, yeah.
But look at the
Yeah, let's
attitude.
get
It
to
just
court.
is.
Let's do
Go
it.
ahead.
For a failure
It's
to
not
signal.
cool.
Yeah, for a failure to signal.
Her attitude?
Yeah.
Well, I
Get
think
off
she's
the
rightfully
phone.
frustrated
I have
at
the right to
Put your
what
phone
seems
down.
like a very dubious
Put your
stop
phone
to begin
down.
with.
I mean, do we really have to legislate
Put your
being,
phone
you know,
down.
polite and
Right
decent to
now.
a police officer?
Put your phone down.
I think you're allowed to be frustrated as an American on the roadways. You're allowed to be frustrated as anybody
Come over here.
who's felt harassed by the
Come
police.
over here now.
You feeling good about yourself?
This
right
is
here.
so
You feeling good about
obnoxious.
yourself?
You feel
Stand
good
right
about
here.
yourself right
You
now.
feel real
This
good
is
about
not
yourself,
helping
don't you? Turn
anything.
around.
You feel good about
I
yourself?
think she's
Turn
frustrated.
around now.
I think
What-
we're
put your hands
right
we're
back
legally
here.
allowed to be frustrated.
Turn
We're
around.
legally
Why
allowed
can't you tell
to,
me
I'm giving you a
you know,
lawful order. I will
Why
tell
am I
you.
express
being
these kind of
arrested?
feelings.
Turn
Why
around.
won't you tell me that part?
I'm giving you a lawful order.
It's
Turn
not
around.
always
Why will
right
you
to
not
do
tell
what you
me
have a
that?
right
I'm
to
not
do.
complaining.
I didn't make that up
I'm not
quote,
complaining 'cause
but
you
it's a
just
good
pulled
one
me
and
out
it's
of my
fitting
car.
here.
Around.
Are you fucking kidding me? This is some bullshit.
Put your hands
You know
behind
it
your
is.
back.
Because you know this is straight bullshit. And you
I mean,
full
they're
of
both
shit.
escalating
Full
the
of straight
situation.
shit. That's how y'all is, some scary fucking cops. South Carolina,
That's like
got y'all
telling a
bitch
victim
ass
because they
scared.
scream, they
That's all
escalate the
it is.
situation. I don't think
Scared of
screaming
female.
about the
If you
wrongdoing
just listen-
being placed
I
upon you.
was trying to sign the fucking ticket. Whatever.
Stop moving.
Are you fucking serious?
Stop moving.
Oh, I can't wait till we go to court. Ooh, I can't wait. I cannot wait till we go to
And
court.
of course, she can't wait to go to court, but a few days
You
later,
want me to
she's
sit down
dead.
now?
Right.
Or you gonna throw me to the floor? That'll make you feel better about
Okay.
yourself?
Knock it off.
I think
Now,
that
that'll make you feel better
is
about
enough. I mean, the
yourself?
video goes on for several more
makes you feel
minutes,
good.
but I think that is the crux of it. So she's taken to jail, and 3 days later is found dead in her jail cell.
Yeah.
It has been ruled a suicide. She was found with a plastic bag around her neck that she had hung herself, which it's kind of bizarre to me that plastic bags are allowed in jail cells.
Yeah.
But all right. So then clearly there was a lot of attention on this case. Did she really kill herself? Her family insists that she would never do such a thing, that she had actually, when she got pulled over, had just accepted a job offer. She was very excited
Yeah, and
about
clearly
things.
in the video, she's saying, you know, in the future, I'm going to sue. let's see what the court has to say about this, you know?
Right, so the family and her friends think that it is totally against her character to do something like to kill herself. And so this was taken to a grand jury to see if the officers in the jail did anything wrong. They did not check on her in the appropriate time intervals, but that was not something.
Yeah, and that's
that they-
far afield from murder. It was very dubious circumstances to me. However, there was definitely not enough evidence to point at any particular person to say that a murder occurred and this was a setup.
So I see this as sort of two pieces. The fact that she ended up dead, yes, is related to this stop because, you know, it was what caused her to go to jail. But I see the scene at the getting pulled
That's
over.
more, I mean, at least from what we have available, that's very troublesome to me.
So to me, it was troublesome on both parts. The officer was indicted for perjury because apparently in his report he said that he removed her from the car because she was combative and uncooperative. Now, the Supreme Court has said that an officer can order a driver to get out of the car if it's in the interest of officers' safety.
Exactly.
So when the Supreme Court says that, though, it pretty much is like a blanket approval of an officer's ability to do something.
Except when it's not. And I think in this case, you see, at least for me, very clearly, he says, "Would you mind putting out your cigarette, please?" She refuses to do so, and his next sentence is, "Get out of the car."
Well, now you get out of the car. Okay, but here's the
So
thing.
it was almost a retaliatory tactic because she didn't put out the cigarette. I didn't see anything that related to her safety.
Well, listen, when you can see from the video, he's on the driver's side window. They're very, close. Their heads are close. So if somebody is smoking in my face, that's not making my job easier. That's not making, maybe I can't see as well.
But would you describe it as his face when he's standing and she's in her car?
I mean, he has to bend over in order to communicate with her.
I think
I think they're close enough. They're within 3 feet of each other. And somebody else raised the point that, it's just, you can reach out really fast and put a cigarette in somebody's face or on their arm
I
or
could
something.
reach out and grab my key and cut the guy. Did he tell me to remove my key from the ignition, or I could take my cell phone and chuck
He
it at
could
him?
ask.
I don't think these are things.
But that's not what he asked for.
Exactly. And I don't think these are things that if you're not complying with them because they're not anything that you're legally obligated to comply with, that should necessitate the removal from your car, especially when there's no safety concerns regarding it.
I think that you can tell within the situation that there is an escalation. She's very upset. And I think at first he tried to help alleviate it by acknowledging you seem upset. Like that's a very validating thing to do, is to acknowledge the way that somebody appears. You seem upset, and then gives her the space to express that frustration. And it wasn't so cool when he was like, okay, now are you done? That kind of invalidates.
And given that her frustration was in relationship to what she believed was a forced stop. She believed they forced her to make a move on the road illegally in order to stop her. And so if that's where her frustration arises, I understand it. And I think an officer who is in the process of writing a ticket should understand it. What I don't get is, you're writing the ticket, give it to her, and go. But he simply didn't like that she didn't comply with that order, and he retaliated against her.
I think that the situation had been building up. Then, the cigarette thing, it's questionable. I mean, probably not a threat to his safety,
Yeah,
but
of course not.
I wouldn't want somebody smoking in my face, and maybe that's why.
But not a threat to safety.
Perhaps that's where it is
If
pretty
the officer
murky.
doesn't like what you're wearing, I mean...
But that's totally different. I mean, when we talked about this before, you were saying that you don't have to comply with every officer's request.
Yeah,
and you were trying to bring up something like, what if they asked you to do something illegal or wrong or, perform oral sex? And I'm like, but that's not what he asked. He asked something to do with related to the stop. Can we get through the stop a little easier, better without cigarette smoke?
But that's the officer's prerogative. And so what I'm trying to say is, where do we draw the line? When an officer asks you to do something you're not legally obligated to do.
When it's reasonable. I think that's the tough thing.
And who is it reasonable for?
Oh my gosh! I mean, this is so crazy. We have to legislate. Yeah, it's illegal to smoke when an officer asks you to put out a cigarette. I mean, really, that's what we want our legislatures taking the time to do. Can't we just be reasonable and respectful? Both people are frustrated. Well, maybe not.
But yeah,
him.
you have to realize
later.
this is all coming from what she believes is a forced stop. She believes he sped up behind her, and so when she switched lanes to get from behind him, he gave her a ticket for not using a signal. So when we're talking about reasonability and kindness, and I don't think you're talking about basic issues of respect here. You're talking about someone who's using his position of power to create a stop, and then using that position of power to further victimize this woman.
So you're saying that she failed to use her signal when he was already pulling her over?
Yeah, what she's alleging in that video is that he sped up behind her. You know, sometimes a cop will speed up behind you because they're going after someone else or for some other reason, and she quickly shifted lanes without signaling because she tried to make quick room for the officer who was speeding up behind her. And then he pulled her over for not signaling the lane change.
I think if she... I didn't even get that the first time I heard this. I think if she was a little more... I don't want to say respectful, but maybe kind of, just different in her tone. She wouldn't have gotten herself worked up, then he wouldn't have responded in kind, and then it just kept going on and on. You were telling me earlier about another example where you had this similar
yeah, and
situation.
I think it's different when you've been through it. And I think, on the East Coast, I'd been stopped several times for no reason whatsoever.
In like what span of time?
Oh, I'd say in like a year period, maybe 7 times.
All right,
no
that's a
reason,
lot.
which was a high amount.
Well, every time it was no reason, you never got a ticket?
Never got a ticket. And
So
no
what did they tell you when they pulled you over?
Oh, you were driving too slow or you're driving too fast, but I'll give you a warning. And I'm looking at my speedometer the entire time. And so one time I got a little testy with the officer. I said, I have no idea why you pulled me over. Because they always start with, do you know why I pulled you over? And I said, I have no idea, but I've been stopped several times, and at this point, I'm used to it. And
Did you say it in that tone?
Oh, I was a little bit feistier, actually, because I was really exasperated at this point.
Because I was going to say, if it was in that tone...
Oh, no, I was very exasperated, and I was just like, and I knew I had everything right. My insurance was good, my registration was good, I'd followed the rules of the road, so I was really ready to take him to task, but in a way that would not put me in jeopardy. And I think once he saw that tone from me, as I'm pulling out my license registration very kind of like angrily, he just says, it's all right, I'm sorry, go ahead. And what a relief, almost like a vindication. Like at least he realized he stopped me for no reason and kind of went back. But I can only imagine for Sandra Bland, who might have had similar situations in the past, that's where this exasperation and frustration was coming from. And that exasperation and frustration should not lead to her being arrested and certainly not her
So let me
death.
ask you this. Did you, any of the times that you were pulled over and thought, didn't think anything had any validity to it, make any complaints against the police department, the officer, or anything?
No, I mean, I wish I had, but, I was young and I was just in the moment of, law school and running around, so you're not thinking about making complaints to the actual precinct. I was just happy that the officer recognized I wasn't in any trouble.
It is annoying, but if this is true, and she had a pattern of being pulled over, although I thought I heard in the story that she was in an area that she was not normally in because of this job
I know she had a new
interview.
job there, yeah.
So, but if there is a pattern of this, you can complain about it, and then it would make more sense to me, perhaps. Perhaps I'm only looking at this one scenario, and that's why, to me, the disrespect and sort of combativeness in her tone, it's just not cool, even though she may have been legally allowed to give him attitude and to smoke.
Yeah.
It just
in her own car. She's smoking in her own car.
Yes, but
prior to the officer
when
getting
we
there.
drive on the road, we give police permission to pull us over if they see that we've done something wrong, and we know that they're going to come to our window. We're prepared for it.
I think we have to be very careful with that attitude of compliance to a degree. Yes, you should follow police officers' orders. Yes, you should be polite to them. They are there to help you in general. That should be the idea you take with you. But when you don't have that, if you're not faced with that particular situation, I think that idea of compliance, I think we talked about that last case where these women were sexually assaulted and complying with the officer. But I think it's that mindset that if I do not comply, here is the outcome. And here in the situation, she didn't comply and she ended up dead a few days later.
It's not even the compliance so much that is the biggest issue. It's just the overall, tone, attitude. She could have. And I hate to say this about somebody who is now passed, but I just want to use it as an example that we could be respectful to police officers, whether or not we agree with the reason why they pulled us over, and it will do well for us, not just because we won't end up dead, but because this is going to make life better, easier. If there's something really wrong, you go and you complain about it. And I know if there's nothing that gets done after you enter complaint after complaint, then I would understand frustration. But
I usually agree that you should be polite to just avoid harsher consequences.
It's not even to avoid harsher consequences, it's just to be a civil human being.
But when you go from would you pull out your cigarette, no, I'm not going to in my own car, to remove yourself from the vehicle, that to me is it.
And so that reason that he gave for pulling her out of the vehicle, a grand jury found was not true.
Yeah.
It seems that the grand jury thinks that he pulled her out because of her failure to respond to this request. The way he posed it was a request, would you mind putting out the cigarette, rather than I'm ordering you to put out the cigarette, which I'm wondering if that would have turned into a different result.
Of course, in his testimony, he said that he did so for his safety and the safety of the search. And the
Which
grand
is
jury,
the right language to use.
And the grand jury simply did not believe it. And I think the grand jury got it right. And I'm glad they did, that there's a little bit of justice for Sandra Bland in this whole mess.
Yeah, I think this is a little. This case got so much focus because of the fact that she ended up dead.
And I think this
Had
was
she
almost
not, then this would not have happened. I don't think that. I don't know. And then there's the other side of the story where this is not justice. A woman ends up dead and an officer gets a misdemeanor perjury charge and faces maybe a year and a $4,000 fine. This is not justice. So I would tend to agree that this is not really justice for her death, because I personally have a hard time believing that she killed herself over this.
Yeah.
That's just my sense, but we don't have any evidence to strongly point otherwise.
Yeah, so...
All right. Well, another police shooting story that we have. This one in LA occurred in May, and this happened in Venice Beach. A LAPD officer was called to help out with a homeless man who was, I guess, being disruptive outside of a bar or something. So officers were called. The guy ends up on the ground, on his stomach, and goes to apparently push away from the ground, maybe to go to stand up, when one of the officers opened fire, shooting this unarmed man in the back. Yeah. So this is I mean, it should be noteworthy because this should not happen often, but it's not noteworthy because it doesn't happen often. What is noteworthy about this case is that the police chief, Charlie Beck, has come out to encourage charges against this officer. What do you think of that?
Well, I mean, I thought that was in a way a breath of fresh air because, you know, the police are, it's nice to see police identifying behavior that's wrongful and saying you should be legally culpable regardless of the fact that we're both police and I'm not going to just shelter you and protect you. I'm going to call you out when you are in fact wrong.
So I do respect that also. Yeah. The defense to this case is kind of interesting and deserves some time to discuss. So when the officer who fired pulled the trigger, apparently his partner didn't have any idea why he shot him and said, "Why'd you shoot him?" Yeah. And the officer who shot is defending him now, saying, even though my partner didn't realize it, this guy was going for his gun.
And then the video that we do have some video, we don't have it here to show, unfortunately, but the video, many people said, did not show that to be the case.
Right. So that's an interesting defense. I was protecting my partner, even though he didn't realize
didn't know that
he was in danger. Pretty creative, if you ask me.
I think the irony is that a lot of people have been voicing their
objections.
Yeah, objections. Yeah, over this because they're saying the police chief should not get directly involved with the DA.
But the police chiefs come out all the time.
And that's on the
police
when it's usually
unions
when it's on the flip side, they welcome it. You know,
and they wonder where the leadership is if the police chief doesn't say something.
Anything. Exactly. So
yeah, sometimes these people can't win.
Double-edged sword.
And the other interesting thing about this case is that both the officer and the victim were black. So do you think that this will help take the race issue out of it because both of the people involved were of the same race?
I think it softens it, but I think it was not just about white cops shooting black people. It was about police shooting black people, treating black people differently. And no matter what race you are, when you become a police officer, I think that culture and that environment sets in your mind, so that you respond differently to people based on their race.
Right. I think we saw that sort of. All of us saw if we saw Straight Outta Compton when you saw the even black officers talking to the NWA crew, like very derogatory.
It's a group think mentality that I think takes hold. So it's not necessarily about a white officer and a black person, but it's just about the police and how they're dealing with black people.
All right, so it will be interesting to see. The prosecutor has not yet decided whether charges will be filed. That'll be forthcoming, and we will, of course, let you know. Yeah. All right, so moving on to an interesting story. Sean Penn, the actor, became a journalist. I had never heard that he was a journalist before.
Surprise to me, but he's been doing a lot of humanitarian work. So
political activism, so it's not too far astray, but it is interesting. So he, and there's no real, that I know, licensing requirement, like how we have to have that for attorneys.
To be a journalist,
right. So he, became a journalist at least for a situation or for a story or for what have you, and interviewed the drug cartel leader El Chapo, who has twice escaped a Mexican prison. And about 6 months after escaping prison, Sean Penn interviewed him. Yep. And then he was caught subsequently. There's word that it was because...
It might have been because of the actual interview that, El Chapo...
Right, because the communications were intercepted, and that's how law enforcement found him. Okay, fine, that may or may not be true. The big issue became whether there should be any legal consequences for Sean Penn for communicating with and interviewing a dangerous drug lord who is on the run from the law. Yeah. So is there any potential legal consequence that you can see for Sean Penn?
Well, not off the bat. We have this wonderful protection, the First Amendment, which is great. And so journalists are allowed to interview fugitives so long as they provide them no material aid or, nothing material to help them with their cause of misplaced freedom. So unless Sean Penn provided him anything, and what he provided him could have been small. It wouldn't have had to be a big provision. If it was $50 or, money in any way or anything that would help him be of material value to continue his freedom. that would constitute a violation. But it doesn't look like he's done that in this case so far. And again, it's Sean Penn, so you would think he would have consulted someone in the legal field before he went for this interview.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't find anything that would warrant him being charged with anything. I think if you want to have a problem with it, your problem is going to be ethical or moral, but it's not really legal. Journalists are not required, or citizens. Even citizens are not required. Like if you happen to find out where El Chapo is, there is no responsibility on you to go to law enforcement and tell them that you overheard something. Some people think that they should be required to, but as of the law right now, we're not. Nobody is obligated to come forward.
And I think it's a good rule, especially when if criminals know this and they decide to take advantage of it, and we have a situation where it looks like it may have helped to even capture him, so.
Right. So there is maybe a moral dilemma here about whether you would do it, but it is really interesting. So he interviewed him, and part of the interview was done sort of through video conferencing, or not even a conference, but Sean Penn had sent questions, and El Chapo answered them on video. And they were about, what was your childhood like, and trying to understand, I think, what makes him tick.
Yeah.
And I found that was really fascinating. So this just wasn't like, I want to know about all the millions, or actually billions, that he might be worth. I think he's estimated to be worth like $1 billion.
Well, I think this was a view to maybe doing some sort of biopic or some sort of documentary style.
Right, and then in the end of the Rolling Stone article, which I have not read, have you?
No, I haven't read it.
That what I heard is that he actually comes to see El Chapo as not this villain that we have all either made him out to be or understood him to be. Yeah. That the problem with drugs is more America's fault than El Chapo's fault. What do you think about that?
Well, I haven't read the interview, so.
But what do you think about just the premise that El Chapo is not the real reason for the murders and the drug trade? That it's Americans and our appetite for the drugs. So this sort of points the fingers back on America. And I kind of like this sort of conversation because I'm a big proponent of personal responsibility, and not everything do we have total control over. But I do think that there is a big part of the problem that we as Americans can take responsibility for.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you're using, you're using, right? So that's one thing. But then if you look at the laws of the U.S. and if you're talking about legalizing drugs to any degree, then obviously that hurts the cartels and it hurts people like El Chapo. So it's a kind of a fabric that's weaved that kind of dictates who's responsible.
Yeah, and I just think that for me, this part of the story is more interesting than whether Sean Penn did something wrong. Yeah. And I kind of wish that the conversation would turn to, well, he brings up a very interesting, albeit very controversial, assertion that maybe America should take some responsibility for its part in the murders, killings, deaths, problems that have occurred in the United States and Mexico because of our appetite to buy these drugs.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Please tell me why not.
Well, I wouldn't talk about responsibility for the murders. And these people are perpetrating these murders. They're coming into towns and they're killing people and they're threatening people as a result of their drug trade. So when we talk about
partially because it's illegal, and if it were not illegal, and we're partly responsible for that in the elective.
And I think that's like
officials.
An academic argument. But when we talk about responsibility, they're responsible. They're the ones killing people. So when I talk about responsibility in that way, they're responsible 100%. Now we have an academic argument about what fuels people's motivations and how things would look if things were a different way. That's another thing to me, but yeah.
Very interesting. All right. Well, I would definitely love to hear your thoughts on that. As always, you can tweet me at Chelsea Galicia and Shaka at
Shaka Strong.
All righty. So let's move on to the big, ginormous Powerball potential winners.
Do you have your tickets?
No.
Well, I got mine. So.
I'm not a Powerball player. I'm not a lottery. I've never played the lottery. Have you?
Intermittently, the big ones,
Okay. So I think, what is it? You have like a 1 in 200 some odd million chance of winning.
Listen, the odds may be stacked against me, but hey.
But you have a better chance
but
than I do.
But I know for a fact this one is the one.
Okay, great. All right. So everybody's been talking about this record size Powerball jackpot, $1.5 billion. And there are, of course, some legal consequences to this, specifically for people who buy a ticket with another person or other people. So did you buy yours just by yourself?
By myself, I already know the consequences can be too great if you go in on a pool or promise anyone any share of the winnings, so yeah.
Right, okay, so you want to break that down for us about what you should know if you did buy your ticket as part of a pool?
Yeah, there's so many legal repercussions if you buy as part of a pool, so I would tell anyone out there as part of a pool, document.
Document what?
Everything. Who's in the pool? How much they paid to be in the pool? What their percentage of the payout will be? And even if you take a picture of the ticket so that people know what the numbers are. You don't want to keep any of that stuff secret to yourself because you don't want to have the pool tickets and then your tickets and people have you accuse you of swapping in or swapping out. Another thing to notice or to pay attention to if you're an employer, make sure you're using your personal funds and not your business funds to buy into an office pool. And in some states, they do pay out multiple people. So in New York, they'll pay out up to 10 people. But if you're in other states, you might want to form an LLC and then receive the money as an LLC and then pay out from the LLC.
So basically you should have, like, if you win, a tax attorney and like a corporate attorney, like they
Just
should
at
be
the
your
ready.
very first 2 phone calls. Like,
Absolutely.
don't even call your family.
Yeah.
I saw a really interesting article from Mark Cuban about advice that he had to Powerball winner or any lottery winner, like go see a tax attorney.
First thing.
Don't go
absolutely.
out and like splurge and buy everything and anything in sight. In fact, the best thing to do is like not change your lifestyle at all, at least for a while.
Exactly.
And when people start asking you for money, that you can say, and you should say,
No.
yeah. And it sounds kind of like a dick move, but it's actually best for people. And I could go on and on about this because, you know, as executive director of the Financially Fit Foundation, I have an opinion or two on the kind of advice that people should follow when they come into large earnings or any money, really.
Of course. And we're fortunate enough that in California, they do not tax lottery winnings, so we get to keep more of our pie here. So.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
All right. What are you going to share with me?
Oh, that was it?
You're gonna share with me any of your winning, even though I didn't.
No legal obligation to, but I may just give you a couple dollars.
Thank you. Since we have that, you know, recorded, I mean, I wonder if that's legally binding. All right. Well, best of luck, Shaka, on your power. When do we find out?
Tonight.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. All right. And good luck to any of you out there who may have purchased the Powerball lottery ticket, winning or not. Either way, we will be back next week.
Regardless of if I win.
Okay. All right. I mean, maybe we'll take the show to some like private island that you own.
You got it.
All right. Cool. And we'll be back next week with BJ, who will rejoin us. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll catch you next time for another episode of Justice is Served.
From producers Maria Menounos, Dario Kristen, Tiana Hobson, Kevin Undergaro, and the entire BHL crew, we would like to thank you for supporting Black Hollywood Live, the first online broadcast network dedicated to African American entertainment. For questions and comments, contact us at info@blackhollywoodlive.com. Like us on Facebook, tweet us, or Instagram us at BHL Online. And I'm your BHL announcer, Scipio. Instagram me at Planet Scipio. Thank you for tuning in.
Hollywood redefined.
The views expressed here are those of the host only and do not necessarily reflect the views of BHL or its owners or principals.